Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 21st of May, 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, and myself, Brian Gerrish. Those
Russians, yeah.
Absolutely, those nasty Russians
yes,
to be.
Yes, indeed. So this is the Foreign Affairs Committee. They have released a report today, Moscow's Gold, Russian Corruption in the UK. They say the scale of damage that this dirty money can do to the UK foreign policy interests dwarfs the benefit of Russian transactions in the city. They're saying this is spectacular because the City of London has been a major beneficiary in the massive flight of Russian cash, according to one mainstream media outlet. This is the bit that staggers me. They acknowledge that there's been a flight of cash out of Russia, and then the mainstream media proceeds to try to link all this cash which has come out of Russia back to Putin. So this is since the fall of the Soviet Union, they say. London remains the Western capital of choice for oligarchs and Russian officials who flaunt their wealth across Europe's most luxurious destinations. Fantastic stuff. Now, what does the report say? It says there's no excuse for the UK to turn a blind eye as President Putin's kleptocrats and human rights abusers use money laundering through London to corrupt our friends, weaken our alliances, and erode faith in our institutions. I mean, you may laugh at that, Brian, but this is very serious stuff. Putin's kleptocrats. Let me understand this. The British government is in the process of privatising the NHS and putting billions of pounds worth of British taxpayer money into private company hands. Is that not a kleptocracy?
Yeah, but we're doing that, Mike.
Right.
That would only be wrong if another country was doing it. But the thing that's in my mind is, has Theresa May given back circa £3 million worth of Russian money that was funding the Conservative Party? They said they didn't want to give that back, even though presumably it's come from the same dirty sources.
Indeed. Now, one of the things that interested me about this report is that they singled out Linklaters, the law firm, as being involved in these deals with Russian companies that are close to Putin. And they said that others would judge whether the firm had become so entwined in the corruption of the Kremlin and its supporters that they're no longer able to meet the standards expected of UK-regulated law firm. Linklaters said that they were pretty surprised and concerned about the criticism. They rejected any notion that they work in a particular market that involves corruption. But frankly, correct me if I'm wrong, but anything that's really involved in the City of London is going to be corrupt.
Inherently, by the nature
yes.
of the City of London. Yeah, I would agree with that.
The National Crime Agency weighed in earlier, and they'd said that hundreds of billions of pounds of money laundering impacts Britain every year, and lots of that is coming from Russia. And the committee report said the use of London as a base for corrupt assets of Kremlin-connected individuals is now closely linked to a wider Russian strategy as has implications for our national security. So it's not just fake news and disinformation in social media. It's not just cyber attacks. It's now corrupt money coming in. The fact of the matter is, how many years ago is it that Peter Mandelson was photographed with certain Russian oligarchs? Deripaska, I believe it was.
Not long, because I just jotted his name down here.
Right.
So we haven't forgotten Peter Mandelson either, who was closely involved with these very dark, dubious so-called Russian companies.
It was probably 10 years ago, so this has been going on for decades, and nobody seemed to care up until now. I wonder why that is. In the meantime, on Friday, Boris was in France, in Paris, and he was talking about chemical weapons. And he said that we need a meeting to strengthen our resolve against chemical weapons. So what he's called for is a conference which bring together, they say, 33 like-minded countries who are determined to preserve and strengthen the global ban on chemical weapons, including through strengthening the role of the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. And Boris said, we have to confront the reality that chemical weapons have been used numerous times in recent years in defiance of the 1997 Chemical Weapons Convention, Assad's brutality in Syria and the attempted murders of in Salisbury pose a grave threat to the Chemical Weapons Convention. And I'm struggling to say these words. But anyway, we join our partners today in calling for a special session of conference of states parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention in June and agree action to support the convention and its implementing body, the OPCW. I think they're pretty concerned about the public perception of the OPCW, of its work, particularly as a result of the Salisbury incident, because the British government got that one so spectacularly wrong.
Yeah, so what is this? This is to take control of OPCW.
Yes, that's what I believe, yeah.
Okay, so while the important things have been going on, I'm afraid I've got to go there. Let's have a look at what so many people were doing over the weekend. And I just thought this little shot from one of the BBC videos said it all. BBC boasts 13.1 million watched this pantomime at lunchtime. Saturday, wasn't it? I don't even know what day it was. But really, this shows the scale of the problem because people here in their thousands, literally, to see the great royal pantomime. And I took a little look at some of the reports because I did find it interesting. I'm just going to put that one in for people who are interested in colours, but red, white and black there. I thought that was quite a stunning image. And no worry about the troops there. We can get the troops to the royal wedding. We just haven't got them to put on the battlefield.
Okay.
So let's see how it went. Well, here was the Telegraph. Royal wedding guest list, celebrities from the Clooneys to the Beckhams and Pippa Middleton. So this is really serious stuff. This is obviously a constitutional wedding. This affects the governing elite of the country. So here we are, a bit more. Follow how Harry and Meghan's royal wedding day unfolded here. Get Sunday's live updates on the aftermath of the royal wedding ceremony and reception here.
Aftermath.
Aftermath
is the kind of word you use when you're talking about some kind of natural disaster or something like
well,
that.
yeah, I think it was, Mike. I've entitled this one, British Public Pays for Hollywood Wealthy to Wine and Dine, because this is exactly what's taken place. Millions this wedding cost, which has come out of the public purse. And who are they boasting about? Well, they're boasting about celebrities. Except they're not, because if we have a look at this bit from the BBC, it gets even better. It's this little caption down here that caught my eye. Royalty of the celebrity world arrives. So these are not just celebrities, Mike. These are part of the royalty structure, apparently.
Right.
So I'd like to say, well, who are these people? Obviously, I know the names of some of them. But who are they? They are immensely and obscenely rich. The man on the left, I think, can kick a football around. I don't know what else he can do. The one on the right apparently can act. For those skills, they are obscenely wealthy.
Well, the one on the right also promotes the white helmets quite strongly as well.
Well, there's a surprise, isn't it? So it's just a question, royalty of the celebrity world. What royalty are these? What does the BBC know about these people that we don't? And we're just bringing another one here because we're going to come back to this. This is Oprah here herself on the right of the screen. So she was listed as another one of the celebrities at the wedding, and we'll have a little look at her a little bit later. Where did the BBC go in this report? Well, they introduced this image, which I thought was really quite striking. So BBC boasts the kids stole the show, and then this is one of the images of the children. Now, I don't know what people pick up from this image, but the more I've looked at it, the more I think it's a very unpleasant image. You could say, would any parent really want this picture of their child to be put over national media? And I don't think there's many. But I looked at this, it's something to do with the little girl's expression and the tongue sticking out, and I thought this is not a nice picture. So we'll leave the audience today to think what they may about that. But we'll just give you a reminder that whilst the millions were spent and £100,000 on the wedding dress and £50,000 on the cake, the police were doing a very good job because they'd been out well beforehand to make sure that there were no nasty homeless people or even poor people messing up the celebrity royalty wedding.
Yes. Now, Peter Hitchens was writing as usual on Sunday, and this was his blog in the Mail online. We need proper constables, not these swaggering gunmen. Now, of course, he's talking about the police in the UK, and he got quite a response on Twitter and other places from serving police, who objected quite strongly to what he was saying. So what was he saying? He said, the mere sight of an armed police officer in this country makes me instantly furious and miserable. Sometimes I just have to look away while I collect myself, then I hurry off as fast as I can. This is instinctive and emotional, but it's not irrational. The reasons for it run deep. I was brought up in a country which was actively proud that its police were not armed. Now I'm told that the rural police are to be armed on the excuse that this will guard our shires against terrorism. It's all a pretext. It just means that, like everywhere else, our police will routinely have firearms. This is the end of Britain as it was. He goes on later on to say they stopped walking, except occasionally in pairs. They zoomed about in cars. They wore flat caps and big boots, handcuffs, clubs, and a massive ironmongery hung from their big belts. And affected by this transformation, they had begun to swagger and scowl as well. No wonder all this clattering stuff said clearly that they did not like or trust the public anymore. Now, what Hitchens doesn't mention, of course, is the training. And this is something that we've been trying to highlight for quite some time, that the training of the police has changed. And the police quite clearly are being taught not to trust the public. They're being taught the public is the enemy
dangerous,
and
yes.
it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Hitchens goes on to say, bit by bit, it grew worse. Even in my peaceful hometown, I began to see cops with submachine guns standing grimly outside court buildings. The flat caps gave way to baseball caps. For an unarmed, modest, old-fashioned police force which walks quietly amongst us, has millions of willing eyes and ears in the shape of friendly and supportive public, but an armed state militia dressed for combat, with its face set in a rigid frown and its hands ever reaching for a gun, club or handcuffs, such as we have now, is a stranger to the people, and as well as making us look like a foreign despotism, it will fail in its task. And I think this is a very good point. They are busy on one hand turning the police into this armed militia. On the other hand, they're pushing out, the government pushing out this propaganda that we've got to act as the eyes and ears for the police. But he's absolutely right in saying that if you go back 30 years, Brian, to when the police were unarmed, were part of the community. And I have to say, part of the problem here is that they started moving local police to other areas and started mixing them up and never staying in one place for long enough to actually get to know the local community.
That's exactly right, Mike. And of course, at the time, for virtually, we could say the whole time that police have been unarmed, weapons have been available in the community, particularly illegally obtained weapons. So, the police still face the risk of firearms.
Absolutely. So let's just have a brief look at the behaviour of what we might call the armed militia. Some more recent recent example of UK police behaviour.
What is your name?
If you think it's him, what do you... Oi! Oi!
Calm down. Listen.
He's just trying to get into his house.
All right, go in.
Leave him alone. Yeah, you just grabbed him.
He's a taser!
Oi!
Right, you've been tasered, okay?
That was totally unnecessary.
Right?
Totally uncalled for and unnecessary. Completely.
Okay, you're under arrest.
And that's on video.
He was trying to fight.
He wasn't trying to fight, he was trying to get into his house. Actually. And you started it. You made physical contact first, and it's on video.
Now that was, he's described in the video as Black Rastaman. That seems to be his name. He's from Bristol. He's in his mid-60s. And he has been harassed by the police, apparently because he looks like somebody else that they're interested in. This seems to be what they have said to him consistently. This was another example of being harassed. He was just trying to get into his own home and shot in the face with a taser. Now that police constable has now, on Friday, been found innocent of assault by the courts. This is the outcome of this is even the Somerset Police, outcome of the trial following taser incident in Bristol. A few days ago, PC Claire Body was cleared of assault relating to the deployment of a taser on a 63-year-old man in the eastern area of Bristol in January 2017. Following the court hearing, Assistant Chief Constable Steve Cullen said a district judge has cleared an officer of assaulting a member of the public with a taser in Bristol. As a result of today's judgment, we will now work with the Independent Office for Police Conduct on the misconduct process, and so it goes on.
I find this interesting, Mike. This is a judge in a magistrate's court. So would this be a magistrate's court paid for by the local authority? That's one question. If it's paid for by the local authority and effectively the police pay comes through a local authority, we've got no separation of powers here. And presumably this was not in front of a jury.
Well, exactly. There are no juries in magistrates' courts, so
No.
it can possibly be in front of a jury. These are all very good points. But what we have increasingly, as Hitchens is making the point, is this presumption of guilt, first of all, and the aggressive tactics. And I find this particularly concerning because in parallel with this, we've got this drive to make this militarized police the front line in dealing with mental health issues.
Yeah.
And so what we're increasingly going to see, I believe, is the brutalization of the public, some of whom are going to be in a state of mental health which isn't necessarily conducive to them immediately doing what the police say to them. So they're increasingly going to be seeing tasers deployed and so on.
Yeah.
This is not a pleasant situation. And of course, if you don't know the community that you're operating in, then you're not going to know who the people are that are having problems and that need to be treated with a bit of compassion, instead of aggression.
Well, the taser comes out straight away, and the taser, of course, is a lethal weapon. It's killed numerous people, both in the UK and the States. And if you look at the so-called safety sheet that goes with it, one of the things is caveat after caveat of the dangers. It can hit you in the eye, it can hit in a major artery of the heart, or it can stop a pacemaker. Many police have said that the rules around tasers should be exactly the same as when a policeman draws a firearm from the armoury. It should be the same with the taser, but the taser's now been sort of downgraded to some sort of toy. Okay, well, I'm sorry to do it, but let's hop back to Meghan Markle, because of course we now have a new feminist champion. The palace has announced that Meghan Markle is going to fight for feminism. The new Duchess of Sussex has been given palace blessing to champion women's rights. So there we are. We are going to pay for this. She's going to do it. She hasn't asked us whether we want her to do it, but she's going to do it for us because, of course, she is royalty celebrity and what she thinks is best. So we are going to pay for her to run this campaign. Now, by an amazing coincidence, just as she gets going, I happen to choose this one, a report from the Telegraph. South Korean women demand equal justice for internet sex crimes amid spy cam porn epidemic. Bit of a mouthful there, but the problems come about because a 25-year-old South Korean woman has been picked up for the police for taking a picture of a naked man who was doing some life class modelling, and she then posted it on the internet, embarrassed the man. She gets arrested. All of a sudden, all these women with English signs. This is what intrigues me, Mike. Here we are in South Korea. Sorry, can we just pop that one back? And if you look at this, who has provided all these English signs on this? Wouldn't they be demonstrating with Korean signs in Korea? Or is this an orchestrated event to help convince the world that there is the need for this massive balance in the genders?
Well, I suppose #MeToo has become this global phenomenon.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting.
I also note that they've got purple hats.
They got purple hats. So we're just saying a bit of a coincidence that the palace has got going on it. Here's the report from the Telegraph with Korea. So we better bring in the BBC. Gender inequality. Stars tell world leaders poverty is sexist. So it's the stars telling the world leaders. I'm not sure whether that's the same as celebrity royalty, but I think it is. So scores of them are calling on world leaders to take urgent action against global gender inequality. And there she is, Oprah Winfrey and Meryl Streep are amongst the big names putting political leaders on notice in an open letter led by international charity One.
So poverty is sexist.
Poverty is sexist.
So they'll be giving away all their money in order to deal with that problem?
Well, this would be my question. But of course, Oprah is probably just recovering from swigging all the wine and stuffing the £50,000 cake at the royal wedding. And now she's busy lecturing the world on poverty and sexism. Well, it gets better because we delved into the article. Here was the letter. Dear world leaders, we're putting you on notice for 130 million girls without an education, for 1 billion women without access to a bank account. So we're going to help all the poor people. We're going to help feminism. And the way we're going to do this is you need a bank account, Mike.
Yes.
This is very, very interesting language. And then down the bottom it says, because none of us are equal until all of us are equal. And at that point I say, is this goal realistic? Because are we ever going to be equal? People can run faster than I can. They can lift heavier weights. They're more intelligent. In some way or other, we're never going to be equal. But that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't look after each other. But who's this organisation that wants to make sure that 1 billion poor women have not got a bank account, or make sure they have got a bank account?
Well, she can't give her money to them, I suppose, if they don't have a bank account.
No, it's a problem. Well, okay, let's go and have a look at where the BBC sends you to. So this is where you can find the letter. This is part of the One site. Poverty is sexist. I have to catch up with myself here to be able to read it. Where are we? Bear with me. This is a technical issue. Nowhere on earth do women have as many opportunities as men. Nowhere. But the gender gap is wider for women living in extreme poverty, particularly if you haven't got a bank account. And then it says, join the movement that's already 9 million strong. So the BBC drifts you through the article into the website, and this is what you find, and then you can find the open letter. So let's get in a bit more, because this is the organisation One. And we've got people in their uniform here, of course, all dancing around with faces on. But let's see where that goes. These are the people behind One itself. So we've got a Mr. Aliko Dangote. Now, he's running a vast African conglomerate. He's clearly an extremely wealthy man, and he's working alongside Bono, and he's working alongside former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron.
Good.
So you get a warm feeling about this and where it's going. So let's bring in some more. We've got Lawrence Summers, former Secretary of the Treasury of the United States. He's working for poor people.
He's the behavioural economics man.
Right. We've got Mark Sussman, Chief Strategy Officer and President, Global Policy and Advocacy, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we've got Michelle Sullivan from Caterpillar. We're going to be coming back to her. Just so that we've got it right, we've got another man here from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is Joe Carroll. And we've got a lady here from Facebook, the Chief Operating Officer. So this is a very interesting collection of people which the BBC doesn't want to tell you about at all. And let's bring in this one, because now we start to see where this is going. We've got Morton H. Halperin, the Senior Advisor for Open Society Foundation. So now we can understand where all the banners and all the rest of it's coming from.
And the purple hats.
And the purple hats.
Absolutely.
But the BBC, of course, in its article simply doesn't want to tell you what this is really about. So we're going to come back to the original article, and we're going to label this completely fake news. But let's go on to the subject of caterpillars. So we'll bring in the lady again, who's working for the Caterpillar Foundation. And this is part of Caterpillar. If you haven't seen it online, it's an absolutely vast company, about £45 billion worth. A very scary picture of some of their chief executives. Have a look at that with caution. And then read their own material, because it says that for more than 90 years, Caterpillar Incorporated has been making sustainable progress possible and driving positive change in every continent. So this company is not about creating wealth for its own people. It's about changing our lives for the better, and that's what they've been doing. So we can now bring in the Caterpillar Foundation. Together we're stronger. The Caterpillar Foundation's mission is to alleviate poverty and place people on the path to prosperity while making a huge profit as we go. And they've started up Together Stronger, and this unites businesses, non-profits, governments and citizens to work together to end extreme poverty. So this is, I've called it communitarianism, Mike, but that's of course what you were talking about last week, where we constantly now see that government structure is being integrated with charities, the NGOs, etc.
Absolutely. Now, sticking with the poverty situation, do you know Alice is the question. Now, Alice is the Alice Project. This is United Way, Alice Project. It's all about asset. Sorry, I can't see that.
We're having trouble today.
We
Mike.
are,
There's
yeah,
ages
yeah.
creeping in a bit here. Can I help you out at all? It says ALICE is a United Way acronym that stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed.
Yes, exactly. So limited assets, constrained incomes, but they are in work. And this latest study by the Alice Project is showing that 51 million households in the United States don't earn enough money to afford their monthly budget to cover housing, food, childcare, healthcare, transportation, phones, and so on. This is 43% of all US households and includes 16.1 million families living in poverty, plus 34.7 million families who fall within the category of ALICE, which is asset limited, as you say, income constrained employed. That is, they make less than what's necessary to, quote, survive in a modern economy. So this is going on in the United States. And the question I was wondering was, is this going on in the United Kingdom as well? And in fact, although we don't like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation too much, but they did publish this report a month or so ago, working families still locked in poverty, time to right the wrong of in-work poverty. And they're saying that around 300,000 more people are now in poverty compared to last year. They're saying almost half of children in lone parent households are now in poverty. The fourth successive increase and a jump of 8% over 4 years. Reductions in benefits and tax credits since 2015 mean that many households are also losing their anchor to prevent them from being pulled further into the current of poverty. But the point here is, Brian, is it not, that why are these families even needing tax credits and benefits? And when we, particularly if they're working families, and, growing up in the 70s, when did you grow up? 60s?
Prefer not to say.
Okay then. But growing up in the
I'll let you off for the 60s.
Growing up in the 70s, Brian, in those days, one person went to work and made a good living for the entire family. One person's salary was used as the basis for any mortgage that they were taking, whereas now it is impossible for many people to even consider getting a mortgage because they need such a high multiple of their entire joint incomes from the two parents. And it seems to me that what we're seeing here cannot be disconnected from the collapse in productivity, the collapse in the standards of the types of jobs that are being created. And I come back to my point that I keep making. The government harps on, and both in the United States and in the United Kingdom, about job creation, the number of jobs that are being created, and the fact that they're crap jobs. This is not being discussed. What is the quality of the job? And we're being turned into nations of coffee servers and shelf stackers, and you cannot make a family living on that basis.
Out of that, or 0-hour contracts.
Exactly.
Or living wage. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to more government hypocrisy. And the delightful Harriet Baldwin was giving a speech to the Security Council at the end of last week. And she said, Mr. President, there are few values more important to the United Kingdom than upholding international law. Yes, it's the very foundation of peace and security, she said. Now, I have paraphrased what she would have said in between this and the next sentence, or at least this is what was going on in her mind, because what was going on in her mind was to say, which is why, alongside the United States and France, we bombed a sovereign nation without the approval of the Security Council in breach of international law. The hypocrisy is amazing. She went on to say that today, conflicts and tragedies in Syria, Burma, Ukraine and elsewhere have shown us the importance of this commitment and the consequences of failure to do so. In Syria, appalling violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law by the regime and its backers continue. And she says nothing about the appalling breaches of international humanitarian law and international human rights law by the British government in their funding of ISIS and other terrorist groups in Syria. But let's move on from that. She said, enabling the meaningful participation of women in decision making is also key to upholding the rule of law. Theresa May is a woman, is she not? Well, okay, there's some debate about that. Theresa May is notionally a woman, but she is the one who signed off on us bombing Syria recently in breach of international law. So I'm not quite sure where Harriet Baldwin's going with this point. She said there will sadly be times when violations of international humanitarian law or international human rights law do occur. There must be no impunity in such instances. It is, of course, states themselves that have the primary responsibility to ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice. So there we go. It's down to the state, the UK, to bring the perpetrators, Theresa May, Boris Johnson and the like, to trial. Let's do it. And then she said, in summary, the UK believes we must continue to work together to deliver accountability, justice and reaffirm our commitment to the core tenets of international law. I couldn't agree more, Harriet, which is why I'll be delighted to see you and your cabinet colleagues report to The Hague at the earliest convenience and give yourselves up.
Yeah, and I'll just say somebody in our chat box, you have to pop that on the screen,
Right.
has pointed out that she's got her crayons, she's got her colouring crayons round her neck. Yeah, that says it all.
Yes.
Well, let's come back to some more UK government hypocrisy, and we're bringing this lady because there was a new statement this morning that Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is going to be charged with spreading propaganda. So this is on top of her spying charge. She's currently been in prison now for 2 years, I think it is, hasn't seen her child. And the latest news is that there's a new charge of spreading propaganda. And we just want to remind people that in her past, this lady worked for BBC World Service Trust, which is now called BBC Media Action, is the BBC's charity. But the World Service Trust, when she was there, was training Iranian journalists. Now, it is purely the UK column that has warned and warned about the actions of BBC Media Action and indeed the trust itself, because what they have been doing is effectively subverting sovereign nation states. The evidence is all there, and it appears to us that this lady is now been caught up in this. Once she's been caught, she's now totally betrayed by both the BBC and the British government, because neither of them, of course, want to get too close to the fire, having started it. So let's remind ourselves of the sort of dirty work done by the BBC's charity Media Action. This is the statement by Julia Harkin. I've put this on screen many times, and we still need to do this because the impact of this is so immensely serious. She says, we, BBC Media Action, worked in 2004 with individuals within the Syrian ministry who wanted change and tried to get them to be the drivers of that. All media development work that has been done in Syria has, in my opinion, been predicated upon this idea that there can be change from within. You have an authoritarian regime and you find who the reformers are within that, and you work with them. And of course, this was exactly the process that was being used by the BBC Trust. And if you analyse what they're doing, is they are working to overthrow the legitimate government of a country, whether we like that government or not.
That's really interesting is the time scale here, because this is talking about 2004. And what that says is that there was clearly a process already taking place, at least as early as that, in order to subvert the Assad government.
Yes.
So, now, Patrick Henningsen on the Sunday Wire last night had a guest talking about the tunnels under Syria, and we've shown pictures, images of those tunnels on this program, and he was making the point that those tunnels were built, or at least many of them were built long before the original protests in 2011.
Yes.
And that those tunnels had been used to get arms and money into Syria from foreign countries. And here we've got BBC Media Action working as early as 2004 as part of that process.
Yes.
I think
would say so.
That's fair enough to say, is it not?
I'd say so. And if people think, well, that's just a one-off statement by this lady, then we encourage you to get onto the UK Column website, have a look at this article, BBC Media Action Subversion from Broadcasting House to Kazakhstan, because in this article is detail about what has been happening with the BBC and the Trust. So we're going to 1995 here, and this is what was called at the time the BBC's Marshall Plan of the Mind, MPM, which was facilitating a British-style social realist soap opera, Crossroads, in Kazakhstan. Now, why did they want to do that? Well, according to the analysis by a very capable lady called Ruth Mandel, who looked at this in detail, it's part of a book that she's written, she says the making of Crossroads was informed by the assumption that the medium of television is an appropriate tool to further the logical and inevitable transition to a capitalist free market economy, transforming the national imagination in the process. So this is talking about using BBC television, which created a soap opera in Kazakhstan. It was a version of Crossroads in order to help push in a capitalist economy. Mandel further indicated Crossroads was conceived as an elaboration of a BBC Marshall Plan of the Mind radio soap opera in Russia based on the Archers format. So they were doing it in Russia, and this is why the Russians are quite right to be highly suspicious of the BBC. It was funded through know-how funds, takes us back to the bankers, supported by the government's Overseas Development Administration and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So here is the British government and the BBC involved effectively in subversion in other countries to change the government structure, to change society. It was produced by the private London-based production company Portobello Media. And if I bring in the second bit, she says, Crossroads, mentally reframed Kazakhstan with issues such as privatization and banking. How remarkable that one that we've just seen is saying we need to get in the banking if we're to save you from poverty. And here's the BBC with the Marshall Plan of the Mind. And she also points out that British American tobacco, Wrigley's gum and Smirnoff vodka all benefited from product placement in this BBC campaign. So just to take it to its ultimate cynical point, because Theresa May has been making some minor statements publicly about the lady in prison in Iran. Let's bring her in again. We've also got Melanie Shaw in this country. So we've got Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe sacrificed really and imprisoned to protect the political agenda of the British deep state, which is subversion. Here, Melanie Shaw's been in prison for 2 years because she tried to speak out about the child abusers in Westminster. So I'm going to say both these ladies utterly betrayed by the British government, but I think Nazanin, I think she was caught up in it, Mike. Did she really understand that when she was training journalists, the ultimate plan of the BBC and the British government was to help to topple the leadership in Iran? I would suspect she didn't. So she's been betrayed, I think.
Okay, reminder, Media on Trial in Leeds on Sunday, this Sunday coming. Tickets, very few tickets. I think there's only 15 or 16 tickets left. If you can possibly get one of those, you better get one pretty soon. MediaOnTrial.uk for that, and get along to that if you possibly can. Now, our digital minister has been up to his old tricks again. He has been busy over the weekend, Matthew Hancock, Apparently, if it's unacceptable offline, it's unacceptable online, Brian. So we're going to protect the children. This is the focus. New laws are going to be created to make sure the UK is the safest place in the world to be online, according to Matt Hancock. New online safety laws in response to the Internet Safety Strategy consultation, which was published yesterday. And the government is going to collaborate with industry, charities, and the public, apparently, on a white paper. So there's a white paper coming. They've published a green paper. We'll come on to that in a second. So basically, this is the government's response to the green paper, which was published last October, the Internet Safety Strategy green paper. The response to that was published just in time for Matt Hancock to go on the Andrew Marr show yesterday morning on the BBC. The government apparently has been clear that much more needs to be done to tackle the full range of online harm. And their consultation revealed that users feel powerless to address safety issues online, and that technology companies operate without sufficient oversight or transparency. 60% of people said they had witnessed inappropriate behaviour or harmful content online. So they're already working with social media companies to protect users. And while several of these companies have taken important and positive steps, they say, the performance of the industry overall has been mixed. Now, of course, the online extremism is not part of this. This is about online safety for children mainly. So what did Matt Hancock have to say? The measures we're taking forward yesterday, will help make sure children are protected online and balance the need for safety with the great freedoms the internet brings. That's fantastic stuff. What was he talking about? Well, making sure that children can only identities can be children can be identified, their ages can be identified. So it's really about bringing in identity onto the internet, because we've got to deal with this Wild West culture that we've got on the internet, where people can do things with impunity. But who was involved in this green paper and the response? The NSPCC, the Children's Charities Coalition on Internet Safety, Five Rights, Children's Media Foundation, Internet Watch Foundation, Google, Twitter, Facebook, BT, TalkTalk, Sky. They're all there. And once again, Brian, we have another policy agenda being driven not by government, but by a collaboration between government, the public, the private sector, and the third sector, all working in concert. So there we go.
In general, out of sight of the public until you know where to look.
Absolutely. Now, we'll end on this one. Tory MPs preparing for another snap election amid Brexit splits. This is Politics Home. And they're saying Conservative MPs are bracing themselves for another snap general election amid fears the problems of Brexit will topple Theresa May, it has been reported. And they're citing a Sunday Times report saying that backbenchers had gone to their constituencies and urged their local associations to re-adopt them as candidates and get prepared for a general election. They're saying that this is because of the bitter row that's going on within the Tory party over whether the UK should accept or adopt a closer customs partnership with the EU. So Brexit's being used as the excuse. One Tory told the Sunday Times it's becoming clear that no compromise that will keep Remainers such as Nicky Morgan, Anna Soubry or Dominic Grieve happy, as well as the likes of myself and Jacob Rees-Mogg. So the numbers are against us. And we face repeated defeats. If we face repeated defeats, then when the withdrawal bill returns to the Commons, the only alternative will be to kick over the table and trigger a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister, which will likely lead to another general election. So why would they want to do this? I suspect that they know that the DUP, which is the only thing that's keeping them in power at the moment, isn't comfortable with any of the proposals that are on the table over Brexit and the customs union because of the Northern Irish border situation. So the DUP is likely to withdraw their support. We've got this massive faction fight within the cabinet at the moment around Theresa May on one side, Boris Johnson on the other. Really what this is about is making sure that the situation around Brexit remains so utterly chaotic that we get to the end of the negotiations with no realistic solution in place. Then really all the cards are on the table at that point for Theresa May to play with.
Indeed. And this has been the fact there's a possibility of an election has been reinforced by the fact that we have been constantly hearing that the Labour Party is training campaigners and is ready to go. So the Labour apparently is keeping a rolling campaign. So if a snap election is called, they are ready to go with their own campaigns. So a distinct possibility. That's it for today's news. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. And as always, if you're not a subscriber to UK Column and you've been enjoying what we do for free, that's very nice. But you can help us by taking out a subscription, because we can only do what we do with your financial support. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.